In healthcare, every now and then you'll have a patient you can't treat, or one that's reached the end of the list of treatments you can offer, usually after weeks or months of investigations and trial medicines. But eventually there comes a point where you need to sit down with the patient and their families and explain to them that unfortunately there's nothing more modern medicine can offer, and it's basically a waiting game until the disease takes them. With coronavirus, that scenario is played on repeat and in fast forward. Every day we go to work knowing that there's no treatments for this disease, no vaccine. We get patients coming in, do a chest x-ray, and know that it will likely be COVID-19 even before the swab results have come back. And whether we admit them or we send them home because they're not needing oxygen, we pray that they're not going to be one of those who deteriorates quickly. We pray that their bodies hang on long enough and are able to fight the disease, in addition to the support of oxygen or ventilation that they may need. It's genuinely a truly humbling time, and a stark reminder that while I hold the instruments and can read the charts, it's Allah who is Ash-Shafi, the only one who cures, the one who determines whether we live and when we die. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. And aside from the helplessness you feel watching these patients struggle and suffer at times, knowing there's nothing or very little that you can do to help, the hardest part comes when you have to make that phone call to a loved one or a relative and explain over the phone that unfortunately their family member is deteriorating, but no, you can't come to the hospital because there's a risk of you contracting or spreading COVID-19. Some families are sad but understanding, having seen the news and knowing exactly obviously what's going on. Others can't quite control their grief and plead and beg to be able to visit or have at least one family member visit. I've seen posts on social media going around begging, if anyone knows a doctor in the XYZ hospital and whether they can be convinced to be allowed in or let one family member in. And while I sympathise obviously with these families and can only imagine how difficult it is, I also sympathise with the doctor or the nurse on the other end who, despite wanting to let those families in, will have to say no again and again and again, because if it's one family, it's 10 families and 100 families, and you can't make exceptions for all of them. Death is inevitable in a hospital, but more and more we're seeing not just the COVID patients who are becoming unwell, but patients who are presenting later and later to hospital, both children and elderly, and all ages in between, who are presenting to hospital with their diseases or their health in a much more critical state due to fears about leaving the house, wasting the NHS's time, or contracting the coronavirus in hospital. This means they're sicker when they eventually do come to hospital, and potentially less that we are able to do to help them. In one of my recent night shifts, I think there was a death every single night in the department, and that's not counting deaths in other parts of the hospital. I think there are around 29 that night in total. As a doctor working with patients who are both suspected and confirmed COVID positive, me and my colleagues were all fully expecting to get the disease. It's only a matter of time, and I just pray inshallah that my body's able to handle it and that I'm granted shifa if and when I do. One of the du'as I find myself repeating is Hasbi Allahu la ilaha illa huwa alayhi tawakkaltu wa huwa rabbul arshil azim, which translates to Allah is sufficient for me, there is no God except Him, in Him I place my trust, and He is the Lord of the great throne. It's a scary time both in and out of hospital globally, and I don't think without my tawakkul on Allah and my understanding of qadr and my trust in Him that I'd be able to work day in, day out the way I am. So alhamdulillah, I'm very grateful to have Islam.